We talk LA Kings winning streak and more with Karo Blikian from the Hockey News on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we are on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. You can enjoy the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the LA Kings may be the hottest team in the NHL right now. They've won 6 in a row and have just started a big 7-game road trip with a win on the road against the New York Islanders on Tuesday. To talk about that and more, we welcome in friend of the show. He is Karo Blikian from the Hockey News, who covers the LA Kings and also part of the Bannermen Podcast as well. You can follow him on X and Twitter at KGBLix, L-I-X. Karo, good to have you. How are you?
I'm good, Eddie. Glad to be back with you, and a good time to talk about the Kings, which is nice.
That is definitely nice. It's always fun to be excited about your favorite hockey team, and right now they've played really well. First time we've had you back, I believe, since we had that roundtable with Austin Stanovich as well before the season started. Things have certainly progressed in an interesting way so far for the Kings, but let's get into it. Season high 6-game winning streak, and I've talked a lot for the first part of the season about, yes, the Kings have looked good at times, but they need to be more consistent. Want to see some big wins over some big time competition? Well, you can check both those boxes of late. 6 wins in a row and wins over teams like the Jets and Stars and the Wild. How encouraged should we be right now as Kings fans over what we're seeing with this team?
I would say moderately encouraged. Again, this is it's almost like if you've watched the team long enough or followed the team long enough, these seasons have their ebbs and flows, and right now they're on a good one. That being said, I'm more encouraged this season than I was last season when they were putting together winning streaks, because of the way they're winning these games. They're finding ways to win. They're not even on the 6-game streak. It's not like, they're just dummying teams. They've been outplayed by Dallas. They've been outplayed by Anaheim. The Islanders last game had a really strong push in the third, but they're finding ways to win. And that's the most encouraging part to me. That's the part to me that's leapt out the most, probably, is that even when they're not at their best, they still can rely on their defense. They can rely on that bend and don't break mentality and find ways to win. That's maybe more important than if they were just, beating teams 3-0 every game, because the law of averages suggests that's not sustainable. I think this is a little more sustainable from the Kings right now.
Obviously, the Kings go out in the offseason. They get Warren Fogle, Tanner Jeannot, Joel Edmondson to be a part of this plan, right? To be more blue collar. They talked about it in the offseason, being uncomfortable, doing uncomfortable things. And while those moves didn't get a lot of people excited, me included, at the moment, do you see, with the addition of these guys and the implementation of this plan for the guys who obviously were coming back as well, is it coming together? And again, I know everything's working right at the moment, but bigger picture, that plan, is it being implemented? Are you seeing this plan kind of being in effect at this point?
I don't know if I'm seeing it in a straight line fashion, as in I can't really tell you that the Kings are now an overly physical team or they're playing a completely different way. They're still sticking to what's worked for them over the last few years. But I will say that the tough part from our perspective is we're not in the locker room and we're not around the team on a day-to-day basis. So it's hard to gauge what those additions have actually added. But I think it's sensible to just say guys like Fogle, guys like Jeannot, guys like Edmondson, they're team first guys. And when you have guys like that, and I think you and I spoke about this in the offseason, you handle adversity better when you have those kind of guys in your lineup. And when the season does dip, I think you have a better chance of crawling out of it when you have guys that are team first, when you have guys that are willing to do anything to win a game. For all their faults, and they have plenty, Edmondson and Jeannot, like, they're going to do things that maybe other players aren't willing to do. Joel Edmondson, you want to ignore his metrics. He blocks shots. He's liked in the locker room. Anytime there's a situation where you need a physical presence, he's there. And the same for Tanner Jeannot. Jeannot now is working really well with Fogel, the other addition, and Byfield. And in that Dallas game, they were the best line on the ice. And that includes two of those additions. So I think there is depth here with the Kings. I think they've both been, or all three have been, I wasn't say better than advertised. Jeannot's been exactly as advertised. I would say Edmondson's outplayed his expectations a little bit. And Fogel, certainly, I mean, we were all kind of pointing to that one as the best addition, and he's lived up to it. He's tracking for career highs in goals and points, or at least landing close to his career highs. So again, it's too early to say, oh, this was the plan and look at everything's working, but it's on the right path. And you'd have to do a lot of convincing to tell me that all three of these guys haven't at the very least helped the team.
Well, when the Kings decided that they were going to move off from Todd McClellan in the offseason, I was an advocate of them bringing in someone from outside the organization, thought they needed some fresh ideas, some different perspectives. We were told Jim Hiller was innovative and certainly not afraid to try different things. And we've seen that certainly a lot of different line combinations, 5 forwards on the power play. We saw even in the last game, Kevin Fiala playing the entire power play on both the first and second units. What do you thought about the job Jim Hiller has done, and in kind of specifically his willingness to try different things?
Yeah, that's always a positive if you're willing to try different things, especially in special team situations when things aren't really working. Whatever you feel about that power play setup, 5 forwards sometimes, and they go back to Clark, it's nice to see a coach that's not that's willing to change on the fly. I think one of the criticisms of McClellan was that he was stuck in his ways or really wanted to see things through before making changes. And sometimes by the time he made those changes, it was too late. So that's encouraging. I think what the interesting thing to me about Hiller is that he was kind of heralded as this offensive dynamo or this offensive genius or whatever you want to call it. But the defense of the Kings has maintained, even though they changed their neutral zone forecheck and all that stuff. They're still arguably the top defensive team in the NHL. And I guess we should have seen it coming because he keeps talking about how Jacques Lemaire was his mentor and how, he learned from him. So he's been dropping those hints plenty. It's just interesting to me that kind of the reputation he had was how offensively innovative he was, but his defensive, his dedication to defense has been just as strong, if not stronger. So admirable job, I would say. And we'll see how it goes. But so far, I think given what he has in front of him, given just the turnover of the team, and it was turmoil in the offseason, I think he's handled it pretty well.
And you talked about the Kings being one of the best, for sure, defensive teams in the league. How surprising is that without Drew Doughty?
It is surprising. I mean, it's not going into shocking territory, but it's surprising because of the minutes he plays, because he's considered one of the best shutdown defensemen of the last 5 years. If you look at his numbers and all that, like, he is one of the top guys. I guess the surprise, or what we didn't account for, is Gavrikov and Anderson stepping up the way they have. Gavrikov in a contract year, like, he's playing probably his finest season in the NHL. Same can be said for Anderson. I think he's playing his best season as a pro right now. So that's obviously had a big impact on it. And the team structure and the team's willingness, forwards too. The forwards come back. The forwards do a great job supporting. So all those things combined, they're doing great. It's a little surprising without Doughty, but when you have that system in place, I suppose we should have given them a little bit more credit, and they're doing a great job right now.
Up next, we're going to talk a little bit more about Vladislav Gavrikov, also Anze Kopitar and Quinton Byfield. That is next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Get ready to tackle the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets when you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we are back with Karo Blikian, who covers the LA Kings for the Hockey News. Check out his work at thehockeynews.com. Anze Kopitar, 19th season, 37 years old. I've heard people that I respect say he's not a #1 center, and I get what they're saying, but 32 points in 28 games. He's on pace for 92 points, which would be a career high for a first ballot Hall of Famer. What can you say about Anze Kopitar?
I'm curious about the people who say he's not a #1 center. That's quite a statement. I mean, I don't know what else he would need to do to be in everyone's mind a solid #1 center. I mean, the superlatives are running out at this point. Like, if I was Rob Blake right now, I'd probably be talking to him and his agent and being like, hey, I know you said, next year's your last one, but I hope you keep an open mind, because he's still doing it at the highest level at his age. And it's funny when, as an athlete and even just as a person, as you get older, it's like your mind becomes sharper, but your body starts failing you. It's like the double-edged sword of aging, so to speak. And neither has happened with him. He looks smarter than he ever has. Like, his patience, the way he controls the game is still elite to me. So yeah, I think everyone kind of said, oh, this is the year for Byfield to take that 1C spot. And even at the time, I was like, I don't know. This guy, Kopitar, he's just like clockwork, 70 points. He's almost automatic for it. He's still going to be in every defensive situation. When the game's on the line, he's going over the board. So I didn't see it quite yet. And I don't know if it's going to happen by the time his contract runs out. So we'll have to wait and see. But what else can you say about him? The greatest King to ever put on the jersey, and he's only adding to those accolades seemingly every game.
From the other end of the spectrum, and you mentioned his name, Quinton Byfield, obviously Kopi's, close to the end. Q's just getting it started, but it's hard not to feel disappointed from a production standpoint with how he's played. 3 goals, 11 points. I don't know if the coaching staff would say they're disappointed with the way he's been playing. Obviously, we'd love to see more points. I know there's certainly a part of the fan base that is disappointed, but what's your take on what we've seen from Quinton Byfield so far?
The numbers are disappointing. I don't think you could sugarcoat that, especially coming off a couple of things. The contract, his monster preseason, it all kind of looked like it was tracking towards a big, even bigger breakout season for him in terms of the numbers, and it hasn't happened, quite frankly. What I've seen from him is, and this is getting better in the last 5 games, I would say this has gone much better from him, but previously he just wasn't taking the ice that was given to him. It seemed like he was still looking to, if he entered the zone with speed and he maybe had a step on a defenseman, he would still be looking to pull up and find the second wave. He was still deferring very much in the beginning. And a part of that is I expected growing pains, him going to center full time, even though he's been a center his whole youth career and then going into junior and all that. I still expected an adjustment, and I think that's what happened. And then he gets thrown back to wing and then back and forth a couple of times. I don't know if that helped. I certainly understand wanting to get him going offensively and maybe putting him in a safe place where he could do that. But that's, I think, what's been ailing him is that he hasn't just taken control of situations. That being said, I think he has done better in the last 5 or so. I think yesterday against the Islanders, he was really good. He didn't get on the score sheet, but he was much more of a driver than he has been in the past. He was going to the middle of the ice. He was trying to get shots off. That's what he needs to do. I am not overly concerned about him at the moment. I think he will get there. The numbers at the end of the day aren't going to, when the season's over and you look at his stat line, you're going to be like, wow, that's not what we expected. But I think he's going to pick it up here offensively because you could tell he's starting to understand what he needs to do. He's not there yet, but he's getting there. So I'm with, I guess, the coaching staff in that I'm not overly concerned about it. That being said, he needs to pick it up relatively quick here. He can't, we can't go into February, March, and we're just like, oh, he had a good game, but he didn't score. The Kings are going to need him down the stretch because Alex Laferriere is probably not going to score 50 goals. Andrei Kopitar is probably not going to get 90-something points. Dips happen, ebbs and flows happen, and we're going to need that secondary. The Kings are going to need that secondary scoring relatively quickly here. So not concerned yet, but it's got to happen sooner than later.
And I guess along those lines, I've been disappointed with Kevin Fiala. Not a young player, obviously a very much a veteran guy, and at times certainly has shown elite skills. But I think he's been playing better of late. I hope this is a sign of things to come. Would you agree that he's been disappointed so far? And would you also agree that lately we've seen a much better Kevin Fiala?
Yes, he has been disappointing because he is such a high-level player. I mean, his point totals were still fine, but they're way off his almost point per game pace, or they were. And I think the most alarming part was his assist totals were very low. So he's a guy that, a bulk of his points are going to come on assists, and a lot of them on first assists, and we just weren't seeing that. The puck was seemingly bouncing on him almost every game. He just never looked comfortable. But like you said, since the Ottawa game, I would say he's looked like his old self. I thought yesterday against the Islanders, he was the best player on the ice by a mile. I don't think anyone was even close to him. He was finding open ice. He was finding passing lanes. He was dangerous every single time he was on the ice. So another guy I'm not overly concerned with. Yes, it was a disappointing start, but I mean, it's going to come. He's too good, and now he looks comfortable, and that's a very good combination for the Kings. Double duty on the power play. He must love that. Time and space, that's where he thrives.
Yes.
So yeah, I expect his numbers to even out. Maybe he's not going to get to that 80-point mark or get close to that because of his slow start, but it doesn't matter for the Kings. All they need, just like with Byfield, is for these guys to get going at the right time. And I have full confidence Fiala will.
Yeah, and I think that's the most encouraging part, is that the Kings have been pretty good. Taking this streak aside, they've been pretty good, and yet it does feel like there are guys that can give more. And I don't think anyone, maybe Alex Laferriere, but I don't know that anyone is playing so far above their heads that you're like, well, this is just not, they can't do this. This is a career year. But I think guys can get better. And along those lines, Brent Clark, again, I don't think anyone's concerned necessarily with how he's playing. Maybe we would like to see a little bit more from him. I think he's had his ups and downs like any young player. But your take on Brent Clark so far?
I am a very big fan and supporter of Brent Clark. I enjoy watching him play, even when he's not on the score sheet. I think he's a pleasure to watch. He does things that you can tell only he can do in the current defensive core, which is not a knock on the other people. That's just, I think, how elite Clark's vision and offensive ability is. I think when they took him off the power play, I think that's part of why you saw a dip in his numbers. I thought he was doing great on the power play. I think that's where he belongs. And and I really like what I'm seeing between him and Kevin Fiala. There seems to be a little bit of chemistry between them. They're finding each other. And I think those are two guys that kind of think the offensive game the same way at that same level. So I've been encouraged by that. Yes, not worried about Brent Clark. I don't know what else. I mean, he was point a game the first 12 or 13 games, and that was like surprising to everyone, understandably so. But I think we all expected that, okay, he's essentially a rookie, even though he's not technically. And he's still going to have to learn the game. I think his defensive game has gone a lot better, by the way. That's one thing that I think was the knock on him. And I think, I don't know how much you want to credit Joel Edmondson and that pairing for that, but yesterday, again, going back to the Islander game, he made a couple of great little stick plays right around the net when the Islanders were buzzing. So he's still learning. I think he's going to be a tremendous top pairing defenseman. I think that's his ceiling, and there's no reason he shouldn't be on the power play every chance the Kings can get to put on him. So that'll come around. Not concerned about Clark. I think he's only going to get better here as the season goes along.
All right, up next, speaking of the season going along, we're going to look a little bit ahead, down the road, and even to just tomorrow. That's next here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Just go to the PrizePicks app and you could be a winner. You could win 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Those picks that you can make, you can do it in most states, including California. Download the PrizePick app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, wrapping it up with Karo Blikian. He is on Twitter at KGBLix, LIX, and he's part of the Bannermen Podcast as well. Karo, looking a bit down the road, we haven't really heard much of an update on Drew Doughty as far as when he's going to be back. Obviously, no rush at the moment. They're doing okay without him, but we're looking at, I guess, late December, early January. But the way that, as you mentioned, Mikey Anderson and Vladislav Gavrikov have played, what do you think the plan is when Drew Doughty comes back? Is it just right back to where he was before, or do you take into consideration how well Anderson and Gavrikov have played and maybe do something else?
My best guess is they put him right back with Mikey Anderson, and then they would keep Edmondson and Clark together, which by default leaves Gavrikov and Spence. That's my guess. Now, if they want to kind of recreate that Gavrikov-Roy shutdown pair from last year, Anderson-Gavrikov certainly fits the bill. I just don't know where they would put Doughty at that point, because you're left with essentially a bunch of right shot defensemen. Not a bunch, but Spence, is the one that jumps out. If they're going to keep Edmondson and Clark together, then you would have two right-handed players in Doughty and Spence to be a pairing. I don't think they do that. I think they go right back to it. Could be wrong, of course. Jim Hiller, as we know, not the most predictable coach. Yep. But that's my best guess. And maybe they, in certain situations still go to Gavrikov, Anderson for certain shutdown situations in a game, late in the game, whatever the case might be. So that's my best guess.
Vladislav Gavrikov, clearly the Kings' priority as far as a UFA after the season. If they resign him during the season, I'm certainly fine with that. But I certainly don't want another Matt Roy situation. I think you mentioned it. He's playing probably the best hockey of his career. Certainly his value is going to be as high as it's ever been. I would be shocked if he didn't want to test the market. What do you think about how the Kings handle the Vladislav Gavrikov situation?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think you want a repeat of that situation, and you certainly don't want to lose Roy and Gavrikov in back-to-back off seasons. I think, they probably should talk to him before he goes to market, because, like you said, the cap is going up significantly here, and there are going to be plenty of teams knocking on his door, And if you're the Kings, I don't think you want him to get to a place where he could field offers, because some of them are going to be overpays. That's just the nature of the beast. And I don't know if the Kings then are going to be competitive. I think after you let Roy walk and you got nothing back for him, you're not going to trade Gavrikov. Now that's very clear. Even like the team is trending towards a playoff berth, and it's going to be the same thing. You're not going to want to trade him, even whatever the case, whatever you think they're going to do in the playoffs, you're going to want to keep him. So I think you have to do your best, put your best foot forward to re-sign him. What's that number going to look like? I have no idea. The comps, I wrote about this for the Hockey News. Comps for Gavrikov are very hard to find, because usually the high-priced defensemen either outscore him significantly or have the potential to outscore him significantly. He's not an offensive defenseman. So, what is the ceiling, cap hit wise for a truly defensive defenseman, a shutdown guy? I don't know. The only comp I could find is Dmitry Orlov, who signed for $7.75 last summer, I should say, 2 summers ago. Orlov's he's talked about like he's an offensive defenseman, but he's not. So if I had to guess, I think if the Kings throw 7.5, 7.75, 8, I know that sounds like a lot, but that's probably what it's going to take. And that's probably what he gets on the open market. So with the cap going up, I think you have to absolutely explore that in season.
You talked about writing something recently for the Hockey News. I know your latest article, I believe, was about Arthur Kaliyev back from the broken collarbone. He's been sent to Ontario on a rehab assignment. What do the Kings do with Arthur Kaliyev? Where does he fit right now with this roster, with this lineup?
It's probably the toughest question you've asked me today, Eddie, because it's I don't know. The top 9 is more or less locked. So you have that dilemma of like, okay, I have a scoring winger here who will probably thrive in a top 9, top 6 role. And the only spot we could really put him in is on the 4th line. And that's historically has not worked for this player. So what do? The only thing you can do is at the very least put him on the power play. I mean, this is where this guy has, I was saying made a living. He's trying to make a living in the NHL, but that's where he's at his best. His metrics on the power play his entire career have been very high in expected goals, things like that. So, and the second power play needs help. Like, let's be clear, the entire power play needs help. And he's a shooter. And if Doughty's going to be on power play 1 and he's going to have Kempe as a shooter and Fiala on the other flank, and Brent Clark's going to be on power play 2. Brent Clark needs a shooter, and I can't really think of a better one than Arthur Kaliyev on that second unit. So get him in, I guess, 4th line, I guess. But absolutely, I mean, even the Kings, I think, know better than not to put him on the power play if he's in the lineup. So I don't see many other paths, unfortunately, for Arthur right now.
Karo, unfortunately, running out of time. We don't have time to talk about the Kings' next game against the New Jersey Devils, but should be a good matchup. Looking forward to that one. If the Kings can extend that streak to 7 in a row with the win over New Jersey, that's gonna be pretty impressive. So hopefully that will be the case. But thank you so much for joining us, Karo Blikian from the Hockey News, co-host of the Bannermen Podcast. He's on X and Twitter at KGBLix, LIX, and you can check his stuff out at thehockeynews.com. Karo, happy holidays. Always appreciate it, and thank you so much for doing this.
Happy holidays, Eddie. Always a pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. All right, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that. For you everydayers, those of you that listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Thursday, we are going to recap the Kings-Flyers game after the game. So hopefully you will join us for that, and hopefully it's another Kings win. And then on Friday, of course, it's another Kings fan feedback show. Lots to talk about. And excited to get your emails. If you want to send an email, lockedoneddie@gmail.com is the place you can do it, EDDIE. And you can leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube as well. Stay active with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We're at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.